Hi everybody, and welcome to this quite awesome watercolor tutorial. We're going to paint a guitar landscape, and I found this image on Pinterest. It's a nice Photoshop kind of a reference picture, and I'm using this as an inspiration for myself. And what we have here is the horizon, and we have the sun setting just underneath that horizon line. Now what I do first is I use a graphite pencil. It's a mechanical pencil, and I start sketching out the shape of the sun, but also the shape of the guitar. And it's a landscape, but its reflection creates together a guitar. Now here would be the opening of the guitar. Then we have a stretching arm with a little bit of reed and stuff. And then the handle of the guitar, where the strings attach, is a Skyline. So I'm not exactly copying the picture, of course. I'm just using my imagination. But everything that I draw above the horizon line has to be in a mirror image into the water. So I hope you like this, and if you do, give it a big thumbs up. And of course you can also find the real-time tutorials on my Patreon page. If you want to draw along and paint along with me in real time, then you can find me on my Patreon page for just $4.50. And you will find hundreds of tutorials in real time. Now in the meantime, I'm sketching and I'm drawing in trees, and some of the trees are a little bit dangling to the right or to the left, and every tree trunk I also draw in a mirror image into the water. So well, that's the whole trick, and the nice part about making a sketch with graphite first, that if you make a boo-boo, then you can always erase it and adjust your setup sketch if you want. Now this is the reference picture. You can find that on my Patreon page too, of course. And the sky is darker in the top than around the horizon line, and the water is darker at the bottom. And the sun is in the middle, and the whole landscape is quite dark. Now this is my Da Vinci brush. It's the number 5. I have a little bit of water, and then I simply start wetting up the paper so I can start to create the sky. Now for the sky, I want that to be quite dark in the top, so I'm using just a little bit of Pines Gray and a little bit of magenta, and then I can start putting the pigments into the damp paper. And this will give me a layer of from dark going to lighter. And I also do this in the lower part, which is water. So just add the pigments into your paper, and the top has to be quite dark. And I also want to create not just an even background, but I want to put in some clouds. And for the clouds, I'm simply using a paper towel, and then you can easily put in a little bit of clouds and also the reflection of the clouds into the water. Now the bottom part of the water is quite dark, of course, and also the actual landscape itself is also quite dark because the light is coming from behind, and in that way we are creating a lot of contrast in the trees and on the horizon line. And well, this is the part which is the skyline, and the skyline of course also is reflected into the water. So awesome to do, and the paper is still a little bit damp, so in that way I'm creating a blurry, far away vision of that little skyline there on the right. And this is the part where the reed is growing, and then I come to the actual body of the guitar, and that's created by the trees that are growing on the river bench. So some of the tree trunks are straight, some of the tree trunks are a little bit bending to the right or to the left. Just make it as organic as possible. You can also pull the hairs out a little bit, and in that way you can start to create the leaves that are on top of the trees, of course, all covered in little leaves, and going around the branches. And I also do that again in the water part. It's always nice to see how the pigments are traveling in the damp paper. So that's always a nice surprise to see. I like that about watercoloring. And as you can see, the watercolor paint always dries up quite lighter than it is when it's still wet. So I keep adding pigments, and I also scrape over the paper to get some water reflections and some lines in the sky. It's also nice. And well, it has to be not all flat, but it has to be as lively as possible. And for the tree leaves and the river bench with the reed, I'm using a tiny bit of green, just a tiny bit. And for the skyline itself, I'm just using the Pines Gray. And the city stands out really dark against the bright sky. I've switched over, by the way, to a little smaller brush. It's the Da Vinci number 2 for the smaller detail. So I'm just keep easing in the pigments, and you can see them traveling in the damp water. And I also use a little bit of yellow to suggest that there's something of a sun going on there. And what I also like to do is to use a little bit of white gouache. I use it straight from the tube, and you can just point out some lightened windows, or well, you can also place a little bit of more color, maybe a sunset red or something. You can do whatever you want. Maybe you want your sky to be a little bit more bluish or red or brownish. It is all possible just by using your imagination. And that's so much fun to do. I also use the white gouache to create some lines on the water, some reflection onto the water. It gives it that soft feel. That's very nice to do. And gouache and watercolor work together just fine. They are lovely. They're like a brother and sister. And well, you can see maybe if you have a little boo-boo, or well, you got too dark somewhere, you can always pinch that up with a little bit of the white gouache. And it's also a very nice effect. You can also use it to scrape it over your paper, and then in that way create some more reflection on the water. Now, what you can also see are some birds that are just flying away from the treetops, and I'm using an ink pen for this. You can use that very detailed, but the ink in my ink pen is soluble in water. So I want to touch it just a little bit with a little bit of water to make them blend into the paper, so that they do not stand out too much. So, and then that is it. That's my my watercolor painting of a fantasy guitar landscape, and I sure hope you will also give this a try. And as you can see, you can always work further on your watercolor painting if you want. Once it's dried up, you can always add a little bit more detail as you are painting along, even the next day if you want. So it's just an awesome medium. Hope you enjoyed, and maybe I will see you on my Patreon page. That would be great. And otherwise, I would love to see you in one of my other YouTube recordings. So thank you for watching, and take care.